And welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I wanted to talk about some more stuff in my Star Wars collection, and I wanted to give a bit of attention to the fighters that you see in Star Wars. I really love the fighter sequences. The X-Wing is my all-time favorite vehicle, and I'm going to get to it, but I thought I'm actually going to do it kind of in reverse order. Nothing against this one, the B-Wing, and in fact, this one really doesn't get a lot of love. Not too many people talk about it online, so I thought I'd give it its due share of credit here. There was a Kmart reproduced version of this toy 10 years ago, can't remember, and part of the vintage collection. It's the same original, or it's the same mold as this one, but this is the original one from the 80s. And yeah, it's a great toy. I mean, it's really too bad that it came toward the end of the Star Wars toy line, and so I don't think it got a lot of major press. I don't think too many people talked about it, and I think it's actually fairly valuable now. I mean, I haven't really done too much looking online, but I've heard people say this one's actually harder to find than the others because it just didn't really sell very well, and it was, again, toward the end of the production line. For myself, the A-Wing was harder to find, and the A-Wing was actually the last ship that I bought, but there's kind of... This is the last one I bought of the original vintage line, and I'm going to get into the A-Wing next time. But let's talk about the B-Wing. First of all, this is one impressive toy. I mean, it's huge. Look at the size of this thing. It's 23 inches wide, like it's practically 2 feet. I think the Millennium Falcon toy isn't much bigger than this. You know, let's get the B-Wing pilot out of his cockpit here, and you'll see what I mean. I mean, he is the size of any other figure, Luke, Han, etc. Look how he's dwarfed by the rest of this toy. Like, it's just massive. The detail along all the structure here is just really, really incredible. As a lot of them were toward the end. I mean, even the Millennium Falcon has a lot of great detailing, but I'm very impressed that, given that this was sort of one of the last of the line, they would go into so much work. I mean, you can see all the engine work, the markings, all this little plate work here, just incredible levels of detail that they put into this thing. What's also very cool about the B-Wing is it's kind of based on some design. Who was it? Joe Johnston and Bill George took some of the original ideas they had for the Millennium Falcon back in the first film of this kind of rotating cockpit. Much like the B-17 has that rotating cockpit down below for the gunner. Similar design used in the TIE Fighter. We'll get to the TIE Fighter. But anyway, so Joe Johnston and Bill George decided to go back to the original Falcon idea and try and make this vessel to be in line with that. And it's a really impressive toy. I do like the fact, now, this is going to take a bit of finagling here. First of all, it's got its own landing gear, which retracts up in there, and you push the button, and this piece and that piece come down, so that's pretty cool. You can actually set it there. But what's also neat is the cockpit has a counterbalance piece of metal inside there, so that as you rotate the toy, the cockpit stays basically, now it's a little old and crunchy, there's bits of plastic in there, but you can see it essentially stays level to the ground as the ship moves. Now, I don't think they ever ended up actually using that. There wasn't much purpose to that. I think it was, they had ideas for how they were going to use that in the film, and there was talk that maybe a set was built of this particular section, but it was proving to be so problematic they didn't end up using it. So, and the actual ship itself didn't get a lot of screen time, and there's a reason for that. I'll show you that later. So yes, this was the last ship of the original toy, the last fighter of the original toy line that I bought. And I actually got it when I lived in England. It was 1986 or 87, I can't recall. And if you look carefully up here, you'll see the original price tag. You can sort of make it out there. $29.99 in British pounds. Now, I'd have to do some work on figuring out the exchange rate for back in the time there, but 30 pounds in 1986, what would that work out to now? That's about, according to the latest, $57 Canadian. So, not a cheap toy. I think this is up there with the Millennium Falcon back in its day for price tag. And I can see where it is, where the money is. I mean, it's a heavy, big, complex toy. What's very cool, and I'm going to have to reposition myself to show you this bit, but it actually has the ability, much like the X-Wings, to rotate, if I can find the correct one. Yeah, it does that. The S-foils do move into attack position. There's even a way to, what you do, you rotate, which one is it? This one here. This engine, you rotate it and it allows you to put the S-foils in attack position, and if you pull out, it snaps into place. Now they're locked there. And that's pretty cool. I mean, that's a great attack posture and a great thing that you can do. I mean, this toy has some incredible production value. Let's push that back and lower them down again. Yeah, a really, really great toy, this one. Huge, very, very heavy, but amazingly detailed. So let me just put it back to its landing position, and I'll even tell you a little story about that. This toy that Kenner produced assumes that that is the correct landing position for the B-Wing. It shows in the picture here, and there's actually a bit of artwork that shows a similar arrangement for how the B-Wing is flown. That's different from how it appears in the film. Again, I'll be showing you the formation there. And that's backed up by how it appears in video games. Again, I'll get to that in a second. In other shows, cartoons, video games, etc., it has been assumed that this is kind of the default position for the ship, with the engine sitting that way, and that's why the landing gear is there. But, as I'm about to show you, when you play the Rogue Squadron games on the GameCube, they actually have it the other way around. They show the ship parked this way, which is kind of unusual. I have a feeling, though, because of where it's positioned in the game, and I'll show you that in a second, it's really more a matter of, well, that was making sense given the other ships around it. So here we are in Star Wars Rogue Leader on the GameCube, and it's not the X-Wing that we're interested in. I'm just going to move my pilot here. You can see there are other ships that we're looking at, but we'll get back to the A-Wings later. There's a Y-Wing. There's the B-Wing. Now, you'll notice in the game they decided to park the B-Wing with the cockpit on this side. Oops, that's the Falcon. Yeah, they parked the B-Wing with the cockpit there instead of on the other side. But I guess you can get an idea of just how huge this vehicle must have been considered. I mean, that's massive. But let's put it back the way it was originally. Here. So why is it called a B-Wing? I mean, it is obvious to some, but not obvious to others, so I'll just show you exactly why. So why is it called a B-Wing? Well, if we change our perspective slightly, give it a little rotation, slide that up there, there you go, it's a B-Wing. Okay, so here's the B-Wing appearing for the first time in Return of the Jedi. There it is there. I've got this little sequence in a loop. This is the first time I ever saw them, was that sort of sliding past all the other fighters. Now, In doing my research, I found out apparently the shape of the fighter made it very difficult for them to film scenes for it. I guess because it was so thin, it didn't really show up in a lot of sequences. So these few clips here, this is really all you ever see of the B-Wing in the movie. What I also find interesting is they've got this different flying formation than that artwork that you saw, where instead of the ship kind of being on one side, or like when it's landed, the cockpit is at the top, and the sort of spine or tail is going downward. You see, it's like a lollipop kind of configuration. I find that unusual, but that's actually the way it appears in most video games. I'm about to show you something from the PlayStation. Rebel Assault 2, you fly a B-Wing pretty early in that game, and again, cockpit at the top. So this is the very first mission you do in Star Wars Rebel Assault 2 on the PlayStation. And as you can see, we start off in a B-Wing. And what's interesting is the sequence starts off with the pilot sort of sitting with the wing of the ship off to the left, much like the standard landing position. But when the combat begins, as you can see, I'm in that earlier kind of lollipop mode or whatever, where the ship has got the cockpit at the top. So very unusual, but this does seem to be the way they wanted to have the game portray the ship. Now you can rotate it in this game, and you can do all kinds of funky things. You can even do a barrel roll, I think. There we go, do a barrel roll. But yeah, I just find it interesting that the movie seems to indicate this is the way you fly a B-Wing whenever you are in combat. But most of the rest of the time, like you're going to see a scene from the Droids cartoon in a second, the ship is actually more like that kind of configuration. Very odd. One other bit of controversy, kind of, with the B-Wing, depending on how much you embrace the expanded universe of Star Wars and the history that it has created, the B-Wing was supposedly in development at the time of the Battle of Yavin, yet it also appears in a couple of episodes of the Droids cartoon. In fact, here's a shot from the episode called Escape into Terror. And what's problematic is the Droids cartoons, according to the expanded universe history, are roughly 15 years before the Battle of Yavin, so how could a vessel that was being developed at that time appear 15 years earlier? Personally, I don't put a lot of value or a lot of credit into the expanded universe stuff for exactly this reason. I think the makers of the cartoon just wanted to show another Star Wars vehicle, and this one has such a unique look, they thought, yeah, let's throw a B-Wing in there. So, depending on what your particular preference is for the expanded universe, you might find this controversial. I don't, but that's just me. So in conclusion, there is the Star Wars B-Wing fighter. I think this thing is awesome. It really doesn't get its due credit. I guess because of the time it came out, just doesn't really have the same affection in people's minds as, say, an X-Wing or the Millennium Falcon or Slave One. But it's a really amazing toy. It's huge. I love that rotating cockpit idea, the S-foils opening up. And if you combine it with all the controversy about being in droids and other stuff, I think it's a vehicle that really doesn't get that much attention, and yet it has a very storied and interesting history to it. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed this, and there will be more Star Wars fighters coming in the near future. Until then, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.